Welcome back. Welcome back. Ed Martin here on the Pro America Report. Our next guest is Tim Hale. Tim Hale, I hadn't met Tim Hale until about 2 weeks ago, but I'd known Tim Hale for almost 2.5 years, I think. Tim Hale is a nephew of Cynthia Hughes, who has been on this program many times, and she and her husband, Sean, have been so inspirational and so instrumental. Patriot Freedom Project is the organization that Cynthia founded, and patriotfreedomproject.com, but also just showing up many times with people that are in the jails, defendants, as well as their families, need stuff, need help. And I remember with Tim Hale, our next guest, Tim did some time. He was in the D.C. Gulag. At one point, I went with Cynthia. I think we got, Tim, some of your stuff. And there was these journals, and I didn't read them because they were your journals, but Cynthia showed them to me. And extraordinary writing and extraordinary drawings and just a lot, and made me think to myself, wow, we hear about people, but the men there are actually, living, breathing people going through things, and they have interests and all. And so Tim Hale's now out and has been really out in the public speaking about what happened to him with January 6th. And so, Tim, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ed. I'm happy to be on. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're welcome. I've been asking a lot of our guests about due process, and I know, you are somebody who did a lot of reading before you went to prison, but also there. I wonder what you think about due process. I know we could talk granularly about the different experiences that's happened to you and to others, but, you're looking at this now with the perspective of having been through it. And although you're not through it all, there, you got some probation and all, you're at least out and home. How do you feel about our system and how the system works or isn't working?
Well, Ed, I'm not classically trained in law, but, I did do my best while I was locked up to, read as much case law as I could. I'll just say this. I think that January 6th or not, the federal system has really gotten far away from what I believe the founders intended when they framed the Bill of Rights. When it comes to, just criminal justice in general, I think penology as a whole needs to be reformed. It's striking to me, though, that January 6th was used as a Trojan horse, I think, to really gut the Bill of Rights. And so, in terms of due process, I'm sure there's a million different definitions for due process. My understanding of due process, ignoring the actual text of the Bill of Rights, due process is basically proper process, the proper way in which criminal procedures are supposed to be done so that, the accused have a fair shot. And that's just not the case when it comes to January 6th defendants. We can talk about the different procedures, the way things have been going. I'm sure from being involved in all this, how many times speedy trial clocks have been told, how many times things that should have been included as evidence were not included at all, the amount of times evidence has been withheld from defendants, the amount of times when things that were prejudicial, should not have been included but were. In my eyes, it just seems like it seems like Murphy's Law, the judicial system. Anything that could have gone wrong or will go wrong has gone wrong and will go wrong. Every defendant I knew who actually fought their case has really gotten screwed, pardon my French. No one should have to go through this process the way it's being done. And I understand that nobody has to like what happened on January 6th, but the justice system exists. The justice system exists for the benefit of the accused just as much as the accusers, if not more. The reason we have a common law system like we do is because we're so weary of judicial fiats or the accusations of the state. And so I just posted something on my Twitter about this guy, Luke Coffey. I never met him, but from the video that I've seen, he didn't do anything. And he's in trial right now. And for what? For trying to stop people from fighting? For saying a prayer? It just seems terrible.
So we're talking with Tim Hale, and Tim, let me set this up a little bit. Also, I meant to do this. You were charged with all misdemeanors and one felony, the felony obstruction of official proceeding. You did go to trial, and your background was, among other things, a civilian employee with the Navy, which means you had to be checked out there and always, and no previous record. Now, your background, a lot of us come from all kinds of things. I think I know that your father is Puerto Rican. You've even got Jewish blood in your history somewhere, and yet you were, before your trial, you were tried in the media, and some of it was stuff that was you, but some of it was the need to make something that happened different. You have to live with that in terms of your own life, but it was so incredible to watch, a caricature play out. And I don't know how do you react to that? And I mean, when you say a regular process, a normal person should not have to go through character assassination in the Washington Post before they go to trial, not even like after, he was a bad guy. And that was what was happening to you.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, I'll be the first one to admit that I haven't always been a great person throughout my life. I had a very rough upbringing. I have a very dark sense of humor, and frankly, I was a wannabe actor or comedian, and so I kind of dug my own grave to some extent when it comes to saying horrible things to get a few chuckles out of 5 people, and ultimately they were able to portray me as a far right extremist. They were able to portray me as basically the reincarnation of the Führer. Unfortunately, That's part of that is my fault. But at the end of the day, being a jerk is not a crime, and I think I'm the tip of the iceberg. Frankly, you got to really think about how many people have had their entire lives turned upside down by the feds to portray them as something they're not. And, I always say this, I got off lucky compared to most because I'm a single, unmarried man. And at the end of the day, I'll be able to rebuild my life, maybe not my reputation. But you got to think about all these other guys who are locked up, who have wives and kids, who really not only their reputations, but, think about how the slander impacts their families. Right. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have grown up, a very, maybe we'll say a nihilistic introvert, but not everybody's like that. Not everybody can endure that kind of, coverage. I was with a lot of guys. I saw it on their faces every day. It really wears on the soul.
Well, and we're talking with Tim Hale again. He is a January 6th survivor. 3 misdemeanors, 1 the made-up felony, in my opinion, the 1512 obstruction of official proceeding, and never been to jail in his life, never been in trouble in his life, and yet portrayed in all these things. I hope, Tim, that the standard is not to judge me on what I did 5 years ago or 15 years ago, that I'm a better man today than I was then. I know you and I have talked about the same thing. I mean, the idea that people can go and in this day and age, go grab a little video or grab a photo of somebody 5 years ago. But, the cautionary lesson to every kid that you ever, my own kids, I'll say, don't do it because they'll come and get your video. Tim, you mentioned that January 6th is the tip of the eye. No, you didn't say this. I'm mixing what you said, but you did say January 6th gave you an insight into the federal system breaking down, that it's just not operating the way it's supposed to be. Is it fair to say that the problem is an imbalance of power in favor of the prosecutors? It feels to me like that's the most obvious abuse now, that we can all say, whether you're a 3-time arrested drug possessor in New York City or you're a January 6th person, the prosecutors have a stacked deck through the judges and through the courts and everything else. Does that sound fair?
I think that's fair. I think the whole system has, to pardon the phrase, I think it's become incestuous. I think there's too much behind closed doors cooperation between the different branches. I think that we're just beyond the point of the justice system existing for justice rather than for checking boxes. I think that there are all these different paradigms that are created through precedent, and over time, I think new precedents have just allowed the Overton window to shift in terms of what is acceptable for defendants and what is acceptable for prosecution.
Tim, unfortunately, I'm out of time. Thank you. And that's that last sentence. I'm glad you're getting your voice heard and that you're out there, because you probably had thought deeply about some of these subjects before you suffered through this, but now you're through the crucible. So it's, I think, a powerful voice to lift. So we got to run, though, so I don't get in trouble with my producer, Tim Hale, Timothy Hale. You can find him on X. Hey, what's your handle on X, Tim?
My handle is Tim Hale, criminally funny J6er.
All right, we'll track it down. I'll put up on social media. All right, we got to take a break now, everybody. Be right back. Ed Martin, Pro America Report, back in a moment.